from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased. Joining me from the US, Nat Natarajan. Nat, the way I love to do it, is I keep it to my guests to introduce themselves. So you are the Chief Operating Officer at GP, and GP is Globalization Partners. We're going to talk a lot today about, how you're leveraging AI, and we talk about the vertical you are in. But again, without further ado, I would pass it to you to just tell us a little more about you, a little bit about your experience journey, and then we can dive directly in our discussion today.
Thank you, Mehmet. I'm honored to be here today with you and your audience. So I am Nat, as Mehmet said. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Product Officer at GP. Globalization Partners is one of those pioneers in global employment. Our founder, Nicole Sahin, started this industry about 13 years back. And I joined about 4 years back with the mandate of how do we make, we have a great, product services, and how do we make this more into a technology company as well as an and I joined 4 years back, and I'm really excited about what the team has done over the last 4 years, taking us into an AI forward company with our new product called Gia. Before this, I've been at various companies, Ancestry.com, Ring Central, Intuit's TurboTax, PayPal, and Travelocity. So I've had the privilege of being here and seeing the evolution of technology, global technology platforms, and how they've impacted businesses and consumers across the world. So it's a pleasure to be here with you and your audience today, Mehmet.
The pleasure is also mine. So, Nat, the sector, or let's say the vertical that Globalization Partners GP, I would refer to it as GP. You are in a highly, I would say, regulated domain, right? Because we talk about like labor laws, hundreds of countries, and now we talk about bringing AI to the picture. So what was the initial insight that made you believe like an AI agent could be trusted to operate in such environment?
So, Mehmet, part of it is my background. I was a chief product officer at TurboTax, and tax laws are complex, and we figured out a way when I was there to create knowledge graphs and take complex legal laws, black letter laws, and how do we make computers automate them so that consumers can come you using your mobile device or go online and do complex taxes by themselves. So when I came here to GP, I saw that we have a lot of this knowledge that we have accumulated over the last 13 years. And not just knowledge which is based on, black letter law, right? But it's also practical, across the employee life cycle. What happens when you onboard somebody, when you offboard somebody, when there's a certain situation in a certain country? Black letter law tells you what the guidance is, but what exactly happened. And I said, like, this is interesting. We could probably find a way to use technology. And at that point, AI was just coming out. So we thought we could use technology to automate some of this, to make it easier, right? So the first thing we did was take that knowledge base, put it into a central location. And, so that was sort of the insight, saying that, complexity is a friend of technology. And how do you leverage technology in this case and the data which is proprietary to us to make something easy for our businesses and customers going forward? So that was sort of the insight, if you will.
You mentioned these complexities, Nat. So, I can imagine some of them is like there's a variety of maybe laws between countries, and maybe you mentioned taxes, you mentioned like other things. um and usually, you know, it's even for a human, it's hard sometimes to judge like what would be the right approach, and this is where we might go to maybe a lawyer or something like this. So designing Gia to operate like with this legal rigor, like, how does come into practice from, you know, I would say design point of view, right? From not necessarily from technical perspective as architecture, but I mean the way you need to design it, and the way you need also to think how the adoption would be like, putting in mind, and you know this, Nat, people sometimes they are skeptical about
Yeah.
technologies, and you said like they are, yeah, complex things and technology, but always we have the people that will raise flags, especially, again, I'm repeating myself, we talk about like highly regulated domain here.
No, look, it's a great question, and I think I started off my sort of career at travelocity.com, where I was one of the founding members, and I discovered that human beings hate black box technology. If you are not able to unpack, right, what is behind the black box, they don't trust it. So that was one of the tenets that we used when we were designing Gia. So look, jurisdictions, laws are very complex, like you said. So from a design perspective, we did two things. One is, how do we take that knowledge graph into think of a hierarchical decision making. You start with the jurisdiction, say the EU, right? Or the Middle Eastern countries, and then you go to a country specific law,
Hmm.
and then you go to a province specific law. You take that nesting and you bake that into your algorithms, into your technology. Second, to make it less black boxy and, hey, this is the answer, right? And we know we're right. We earlier on started having humans in the loop, right? So the first iteration of Gia, we were using it within the company. So our salespeople were using it, our HR professionals in 50 countries were using it, and they were giving us feedback on what they liked, what they did not like. And as AI became more advanced, we started using reasoning models to tell you, why did Gia get to this conclusion? How was Gia thinking about it and getting to that conclusion? So I think, having that reasoning, especially with a complex technology like AI, is very powerful, because it tells you how Gia thought and it got to this answer. So you can interrogate it, right? One additional point I'll make, and I'll stop, is, so how did we know reasoning, right? We are all engineers. We don't understand how a lawyer thinks. So we actually have a legal team on my staff, right?
Hmm.
They are part of Gia. So they started working with the engineering team and saying, how, this is how I thought about getting to the answer. So the actual workflow that a legal person goes through to get to an answer, we try to encapsulate that thinking and that logic into the way Gia thinks. And we make that transparent so it doesn't feel like it's a black box. And I've had hundreds of people come and challenge Gia, right? Okay, let me go and test it. And what does the other models say? What does Google say? What happens? And I think the fact that we are able to reason and unpack was a key differentiator for us.
I'm glad, you know, the discussion brought us to this point because you mentioned the human in the loop, right? So where do you think, you know, during the testing and maybe now after you enroll it, like what is the limit, what is the border of, you know, giving the machine, the agent, whatever you want to call it, the autonomy to take decisions, and when really do you think like the human is in the loop? And now again back to the complexity thing, because we're talking about massive differentiations, and even maybe people will think, yeah, it's like slight differentiation, and here we talk like labor laws, taxation, accounting, because all this is like areas that GP cover, right? Because you are in the business of, you know, employment of the employer of the record, and you know you take care of you know, payrolls, you take care of a lot of things, right? Legal, finance, and everything. So what are like some of the points, if you can share that, Nat? And I think this is beneficial for the broader, I mean, executives who are thinking to deploy, AI agents currently. So when we really have to keep the AI, sorry, the humans in the loop versus, yes, like we can trust AI can now do its job.
So I think, Mehmet, I don't believe the technology is at the AGI level where we can trust AI to do things and think for itself completely. We are still at the point where we have to provide guardrails. And with GIA and with our EOR product at GP, we have made sure that we provide those guardrails. So the answers that it gives, right? There are certain boundaries we would not go outside. Right? We have models which test that boundary to make sure that GIA stays, the answers stay within the guardrails that we have set. And when we find that the answer is a little different than our set of assumptions, our set of data, that's when we bring in humans in the loop. When we also use our internal users, our customers sometimes tell us, "Hey, I don't think this is right," and that's another point where it triggers a human in the loop process to make GIA better, the guardrails better. So I think in a sense, we are very careful about setting those guardrails and not trusting AI completely just yet, right? We are not there as a technology capability just yet. You have to be very prescriptive on what those guardrails are. So we use a lot of LLMs today as an example, only for natural language processing, right? Everything else, the answers that it gives, GIA gives, we have gone and vetted, right? Close to 100,000 articles, which are based on black letter law and also the practical knowledge that we have got over the last 13, 14 years. Plus, we go and scrape about 1,500, legal sources. But all that is vetted into these articles that are reviewed by human beings. And our model, our RAG model, goes and makes sure that it only gives answers from there. So that's a guardrail that we set. And if it's
Mhm.
like you can go and ask it a question on outside of global employment, and Gia will come and say that I don't know that.
Right.
So that's an example of guardrail that we have set.
Is this where I would call them the general models fall short in your world, Nat? Like, um, because again, like people here talks about like now models are commoditized kind of, and some people they say like the important part is the data. So is this like really what I would call it like the differentiation for you, especially in your domain?
It absolutely is. I think if you there are recent articles which have come out that some of the models, 2/3 of the data that they get are from unreliable sources like Reddit and Wikipedia or YouTube, etc. So when it comes to specific, very legally compliance or medicine, right? You want to make sure that the data that the LLMs have or the models have is curated, it's trusted, right? Before you can go and trust the models. And I think that's our differentiation today because we've had this data for the last 14 years and we've been able to curate it and make it usable by a technology like AI. And the evolution that I see is, recently there were some companies which have a lot of information, um, proprietary data in taxes and accounting, do a deal with OpenAI, saying they will then share this, knowledge with them. So I think proprietary data is the differentiator for AI. I think you cannot create a great product with the LLMs, without the LLMs, if you don't have good data.
Now, you mentioned something also about your models knowing from your knowledge, but again, especially in customer-facing use cases, is that there is a behavior for the LLM through either a chat bot, the chat
Yeah.
interface, or like maybe you are automating it to send emails, or maybe to reply on support cases and so on. So where like you mentioned safeguarding and guardrailing also as well, but what are kind of the, I would say, best practices for making sure also the model behave the best way? So of course, like you gave an example, like for example, I ask something not related to your domain and to
Yeah.
answer me like, I don't know, this is not my area of expertise. But I mean, regarding, giving the trust, like, I mean, giving the trust for whoever is interacting with this agent, what kind of behaviors you train it to act on, if I might say like this way, so it can trust, enterprise users that you deal with.
Look, it's a great question. I think this is how we have been careful about training it with lawyers and HR professionals who will look at the responses, look at the reasoning, look at the logic, and give our engineers guidance and saying, hey, this is how I think we need to adjust the models. So one thing we did in terms of guidelines and so thinking was really so if you ask it a question, um, it thinks like a lawyer, right? So how does a lawyer think, right? And that's what we have sort of trained it to. Secondly, it goes and thinks like an HR professional. How would you respond to a professional? And unpacking that and really showing them two things. One is we have this tag called GP verified, right?
Hmm.
So we know that the data that the answers come from is verified by GP. So we have looked at it, human beings have looked at it. So that's one thing. Secondly, the step by step how it got to the answer. So if you unpack the answer, how it got to the answer was a second area. So I think if you combine these two, it gives a lot of confidence in the fact that we got to this answer. Third, I mean, there is no substitution to having actual users use it, right? And give you feedback. And in some cases, we had to adjust the level of specificity. So some cases we found that users in large enterprises said, "Look, it's too generic. Can you be more prescriptive?" Right. So then we said, "Okay, black letter law is not good enough. Let us show you the black letter law, but also let us show you best practices in this case." Right. So we went down one level of specificity. Then we got feedback input from large enterprises saying, "Hey, Nat, that's good, but I want you to answer based on my HR policies in addition to your compliance." So then we increase the so now we have a concept of geo enterprise where you can have a local tenant where your data, you upload information, you upload your policies. We don't share it. We don't put it back into our models or outside our four walls. But then Gia takes that as a source and answers based on your models. So or your data. So we don't go outside your guardrails that you have put. So I think we're very careful about making sure that Gia has a really strong corpus of knowledge, but it answers based on what your policies are, but it keeps you within those guardrails that are important to keep you compliant.
Right. Nat, are you seeing also a shift of acceptance, I would say, especially, from at least your customers on the idea? I don't want to use it's I'm hoping like it's not like a trademark or something, but Microsoft called Copilot, right? So
Yeah.
they name it as Copilot. So people are calling co-worker or assistant, whatever you want to call it. So collaborator, some people are calling it the collaborator. So from a global HR platform perspective, how does this, like, if I am one of your customers today and I'm interacting with Gia, how would that experience looks like having kind of a um, co-worker with me? Let's call it this way.
um, you know Let me read you a customer quote. How about that?
Yeah, that
So
would be
this is a
fantastic.
customer who has used Gia. So the quote is, knowing that Gia's guidance is based on expert reviewed, legally vetted sources gives me peace of mind. It lets me spend less time on paperwork and more time on strategic initiatives. This is a company called Herb Pharma, who we have a case study on our website. You can
Hmm.
go and take a look at it. So, people are one, everybody in the boardroom is asking about AI. So let's start with the, top of the house. You have, board members saying, what are we doing with AI? It's the last 2 3 years, there's so much of investment, so much of buzz in the industry. management teams across are focused on how do you make AI, how do you use AI, and so far there's a lot of hype around it, and some companies are or some use cases are sort of breaking through. And what we are seeing is HR is usually, squeezed for resources. They're asked to support more and more, but they're squeezed for resources. So I've seen a real step forward with some CHROs, HR operations managers, HR professionals saying, what tools can I use? What vetted tools can I use which will help me make me more productive? So that's what I'm seeing, and I think that's, this example was one of them. And Gia solves this use case where today, say you're a company based in the UAE, and so you're in Dubai, you want to hire somebody in Singapore. You don't have an entity there, or you may have an entity there, but you may have two people working in Singapore, and you want to hire the third person. So to give this person a legally compliant employment contract so they can start working, you would have to contact an external company in Singapore to make sure that you can give them a legally compliant employment contract. Laws change, pension laws, labor laws, etc. Um, and so you send a request. Somebody in your legal department, your HR department will try to find an external company. They will charge you a lot of money to give you that answer, and it may take you days, if not weeks, to get that back. G answers that in a matter of minutes. So the kind of
Wow.
productivity that you see, saying you upload your Dubai-based employment contract, Gia will give you a compliant contract based on that in Singapore. And
Wow.
you can take it to your lawyer at the end of it, but 90% of the work is done.
That's really, impressive, I would say. Now, let me ask you this, Nat. Sometimes people challenge, and we know this in the HR, space. So people might challenge, for example, a decision. I'm talking here about the human aspect of things. Like, oh, let's say, by the way, like in this contract, for example, based on the, let's say, the UAE, rules, you cannot have this, you have that. So but maybe they are wrong, and then you go and say, hey, no, by the way, there is an amendment for this law and based on this. So how comfortable do you think also to get the AI to do this, what we call like explaining the explainability, right? uh because you are taking it, because probably you are taking decisions also that sometimes might have like legal implications or maybe compliance implications, or maybe someone would say, like, I would I would accept only, let's say, to be paid in dirhams, the local currency here. But actually, for compliance, I need to be paid in, I don't know, maybe in US dollars. So, and when Gia comes here in the picture and try to explain this from, how do you think, about this explainability from legal perspective, compliance perspective?
Gia has reasoning, so it can unpack decisions. It can give you, references. So what we do with every answer, we give you a couple of things. One is we give you all the verified sources that Gia went to get the answer from, so you can go and check. Secondly, it tells you if it's a GP verified article, you can go and see why we got to that point, right? So we can explain as much as we want. I think sometimes we found is you need humans when it comes to dealing with human beings.
Hmm.
There are cases where you need a person to talk to them, to explain to them, to give them some level of trust. So I don't think our goal with Gia is to replace human beings. It is really to augment, to make it easier, right? So you as an employee, you can talk to Gia about your benefits. You can talk to Gia about when the next payroll cycle is, or when the next holiday is in your country. But when it comes to sensitive matters, we still believe you need to have a human being dealing with human beings. So this is really augmentation to help productivity, not as a replacement.
Absolutely, yeah. By the way, like every leader I interviewed and I talk outside of the podcast, like this theme is coming again and again, Nat. And people, I think now more than any time before, they understood that, this I would call it noise, hype, whatever you want to call it, about, oh, like AI is coming to take your job and everything. It's not like the case, at least for the time being, in the foreseen future. And I have a book which I didn't finish yet, but I can recommend people to go and start reading it, because from economical perspective, it's good to understand. It's called Prediction Machines Updated and Expanded. Like, this is the new version, The Simple Economics of Artificial Intelligence. I highly recommend people to go read this book, because it also, and the reason I found like it's good to mention it, because of what you said, Nat, like about, there's a reasoning and there's a human. So there's a prediction which the machine does, and there's something in the book they could talk about, it's a judgment, right? So you need the human judgment, which machines not all the time is able to do. So this is where you probably back to your human in the loop also as well. Makes a lot of sense. Now, maybe it's kind of a cliche question, and I know this, but was there anything hard about keeping the agent ethically grounded and at the same time powerful? Were there any challenges in making that, or because of it's a closed model, that didn't apply?
Look, we have models which go and check if you have any biases in our
Right.
in our model, in our training, in our data. So we have models. I mean, we have this model called the judge, which goes and judges every answer, and then it goes through specific use cases that we have sort of given it. So we do worry about it, and we do take measures to reduce it as much as possible.
Not also, I believe, and you mentioned about years and years of knowledge, experience that was there. And I'm sure like there was like a huge effort from the team to build all this. So what kind of engineering talent did you need to build a platform like Gia? And from best practices, because we talk about innovation and we talk about compliance at the same time. So how you know flexibility slash freedom in innovation, but at the same time we need to make sure that, yeah, we this agent is compliant and all the things that we mentioned and not biased and so on. So can you like let us know more about, like, on a high level, of course, like what kind of talent did you need to build the platform?
I'll say, I mean, innovation is a mindset.
Hmm.
And we've had that as a company. I think Nicole, our founders, founded this company. No one knew what an EOR was, and she stitched this together. And now it's a pretty big industry across the world, and we've spawned a lot of competition as a result of that. So that spirit of innovation has always been there. That's a spirit of really breaking boundaries and doing things which are not done today. Second part of our culture is really focused on compliance, right? She set up this company to make sure that our customers have peace of mind, because we have done the hard work of making sure that their employees, our employees, are compliant when it comes to global employment. So those two things were sort of culturally baked into the company, right? So then you add on some, young, motivated, and experienced AI engineers, which we did, and we were fortunate to bring in a team who has worked together over two companies. So they came and joined us, and they started understanding what the ecosystem was and what the culture was and what the problems were. So combining that engineering skill set mindset with a culture of innovation and compliance really is the key, right? Um, and look, in any new place or any established organization, doing something new is always hard. You got to break some eggs. You got to crack the eggs a little bit. You got to look at it differently, and then you got to find a way to curate it to before take it out to customers. So I think that's the process of innovation that we went through. In fact, G as an idea came from a hackathon.
Mm.
And so that hackathon then became an interesting idea. We put more money behind it. We started using it internally, and then within 6 months, we were like, "Man, this is so great! We can take it outside our four walls." So that spirit of innovation, but also with the culture of compliance, with really great talent, I think that's the secret sauce. The one maybe, lesson learned, and maybe to for your listeners, I found today, if you have a an engineer in their early career, they have less fear. They don't think about the legacy systems. They think about solving problems with some technology. You marry them with someone who's had a little bit more experience, and they're unstoppable.
Yeah.
So one of my early engineers, who's in their mid 20s, he's my mentor. I learned from him. I learned about AI
Wow.
from him, right? Because I'm not schooled in this. When I started, we didn't have this, right? So I use him as my mentor to teach me what are the trends happening in AI.
Wow. That's fascinating. Now, you mentioned kind of your profile of your stakeholders, Nat, and for large enterprise, I believe it's like CHROs, and maybe in startups it's still the founder and the or founders and their team. Correct me if I'm having this wrong impression. I think startups are more ready in general to what you offer, like regardless of the AI part. And then, of course, because they are startups, they know about the AI. I'm interested in the enterprise part. Like, how are you seeing, the leadership mindset shifting towards adopting AI? Like, of course, you mentioned also like a couple of minutes ago about like how the board is pushing everyone adopt AI, adopt AI, adopt AI. But HR specifically is a different beast by itself. I spoke to a lot of people in the domain, purely HR people, not tech people, and everyone telling me, like the way we used to think before about traditional HR, it's not the same. So now, how this is changing with all the new advancements around AI and agentic AI, and probably a lot of other innovations that would come. So how, like, if you want to describe someone doing it the right way, I would call it this way. What kind of shift in leadership you're seeing happening now to adopt AI properly?
So you talked about enterprises, CHR enterprises. So I'll take that the question first, and I'll get to
Sure.
um, it's interesting. I also thought initially that it would be a lot of startups who would use GIA. They have more propensity to use tools. They have more
Hmm.
resource constraint, right? And then what I'm discovering is uh, larger enterprises have bigger problems, bigger productivity issues, because they have now talent and access to talent across the globe. So their jobs are becoming harder, right? And they spend a lot more money and need a lot more time to manage this. So we've signed up a couple of large enterprises, actually, more than a handful, who operate in 20 countries, 20 plus countries. And for them, when they started using Gia, they're like, oh my God, this is such a time saver for us, such a productivity saver for us. One of them bought 100 licenses, which I was like, I thought I'd set 2 or 3 licenses to a large enterprise. They're like, no, we want every HR professional to use it because it so much increases productivity. So I think the bigger you are, and the more global your operations are, Gia actually is a better fit for you,
Hmm.
right? Because it saves you a lot of time and money to run your operation. Um, I think because the CHROs sit in boardrooms. I'll go to your second question. They sit in boardrooms. They have adopted some level of technology in their functions, and now they're being asked to figure out, how do I change or transform organizations with agentic AI in mind? What does it mean to the workforce? Now, all of a sudden, in addition to a human workforce, I have a digital workforce. How do I manage that? Right? That's the kind of thinking that I see CHROs going through. And then the natural question is, okay, if I have to help the corporation or the enterprise think about how do you transform using this technology, then what do I do with my own function?
Mhm.
So that's the kind of thinking that I'm seeing in the mindsets of HR leaders across the globe.
Nat, I think to back to the point you mentioned about how the HR because of the global workforce and the I think another thing, and you mentioned productivity, you mentioned saving costs. Um, I'm not sure if this is one factor, and this is just popped up in my head as a factor. So, if you think about it, like human resource department is the first and last department as an employee you deal with. So you deal
Yeah.
with them when you onboard, you deal with them when you leave. So I think also will affect the culture of the company because when things get faster,
Mhm.
also me as an employee, I would have better impression about this company. Oh wow, like see how smooth they do things. And this is of course we know like there are some platforms where
Mhm.
people can write, their reviews, their
Yeah.
experiences. And I think this is correct me if I'm wrong. Like, also it will get them into a better reputation as employers also as well, right? So because the let's call it the employee experience or the onboarding experience, right?
Absolutely. I think, look, I mean, to make that first interaction with your employees smooth, frictionless, makes you, my sons are 26 and 22, and their view of how companies, corporations, deal with them in a very digital first way is very different than I started, my career 35 years back. So I think having that experience for your employees, which is a smooth, frictionless, on-demand, personalized, is a no-brainer, right? And as you do that, it changes the culture and the engagement of the employees with you.
So that turns into positive outcome, I would
Yeah,
say it like like people sometimes they underrate the culture part, but for me, like I think this is very 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 important factor to put in. Now other than AI and other, like you get Gia now, people are using it. uh, what other things you can share? Maybe I don't like to ask the question future trends because like it's very generic. No one knows the future anymore. Like every day we see new model coming, new things. But if you want to give us like maybe a your own opinion where we are heading with the advancement of these technologies when it comes to global employment, where do you envision this domain to be, or this vertical to be, let's say in the near future? I will not ask you in 5-10 years, of course, no one knows, but I mean in the foreseen future, like what major things also we can expect, and maybe something you are working currently on you can share with us, that would be great.
yeah. Look, you're right. I will not predict the future. That is always a dangerous thing to do. Um, what I do see is I think the complexity of global employment is going to continue to increase. We have so countries, jurisdictions in the world are trying to regulate more, trying to improve and add new sort of constraints. So that is not going to change. So that's a constant which is going to keep on evolving. I think the future around global employment is really, we believe talent exists anywhere in the world, and access to talent. Companies which find ways to access that talent, leverage that talent in a frictionless way, will have better outcomes for their stakeholders, for their customers, for their investors. So platforms like ours are really gung ho on automating as much as possible, while making sure that when things need to be handled by human beings, so the combination of technology and humans, I think that's something that I see coming to fruition. I mean, so far, so if I look at just the next 12 months, I think the first 3 years of AI has been a lot of hype, a lot of infrastructure building, and now you see the first signs of real productivity coming in certain pockets. So the next 12 months, I think, really will be companies taking a use case, like taking a business process and completely going agentic with it, And as a result, they'll start seeing real productivity. So I do believe automation with humans in the loop and augmenting with human beings is something that is going to see companies are going to benefit from it, employees are going to benefit from it in the next 12 months.
Yeah, this is the hope. Fun fact about asking about trends, because you don't predict the future. I don't also as well, Nat. When I was preparing to launch the podcast 3 years ago, ChatGPT just came, right?
Yeah.
And um, so I was trying to think like what kind of questions I can ask, and of course, like the last question trends. And once ChatGPT came, and I started to see like I removed this question. I said like it doesn't make any sense to ask anyone in any domain, especially for a technology and business podcast, because yeah, like things are moving fast. But I would agree with you like about I'm optimistic about the future, and I like when you said that it was like kind of experimental past few years now, for 3 years again, like when we saw like the first general use of generic AI and generative AI, and now we start to see like agentic AI. So it's exciting times to be in, and it reminds me a lot of, although like I was very young, but it reminds me also of the internet times when it first came, and people are trying to see like, okay, how we can use this, how we can take it, and then the rest is history. Now, if you want to give us like kind of maybe final thoughts, closing remarks from you, Nat, maybe something I should have asked you briefly and I didn't. So feel free. This is a space for you. And as usual, I keep kind of a call to action, like where people can get in touch and learn more.
Thank you, Mehmet. Look, it's an exciting time to be alive. I mean, it really is. I think this AI, our technology is in its infancy. It's going to transform everything that we touch. And I'm sure it's a cliche, but I feel it's really real. The trend or the big shift we saw in technology with the internet, the big shift we saw with cloud, the big shift we saw with mobile, all that is probably not as big as this shift to AI and making having digital agents on your side, making you more productive. So it's a really fascinating time. So my call to action really is take advantage of it. Don't be afraid of it. And to take advantage of it, you'll have to take some risks. And it can be careful, it can be measured. But in my opinion, if a company is not thinking about it today, they're not experimenting with it today, whatever the function is, you'll get left behind. This is a wave that you cannot stop. You can be a part of it and you can lead it. So take a little bit of risk here, believe in it, right? And it is here to stay. This is not a fad anymore.
Absolutely. And where people can get in touch, Nat.
So, we are on our website, g-p.com. You can email me, nat@g-p.com. And I would love to talk about our GIA product. I would love to talk about our EOR product, which is rated one of the best in the world. So, but look, I'm so glad that you have me on your show. I'm super excited about the next generation of technology and what we are doing as a company to make it easy for all of you to employ people anywhere in the world.
Absolutely, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, Nat, today. For the audience, the links that Nat just mentioned, you will find them in the show notes if you are listening on your favorite podcasting app. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find them in the description. Just I want to highlight one more thing, Nat. I always kind of biased by any product, any service that solve complex problems and makes people's lives easier. And I think this is one of the things, the business you are in is exactly this. And like kudos to you and the team, for putting this product for everyone who is in need. And there's a lot of companies who are in need. As I said, you can find all the links that Nat mentioned in the show notes, and this is usually how I add my episodes. uh, if you just discovered us by luck, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed. If you did so, give me a favor, subscribe, share, and uh, you know, tell people about this podcast. And if you are one of the people who keeps coming again and again, thank you so much. This episode probably it's airing in the last week of December or maybe before. So big thank you for all the audience for 2025. Like you took the podcast to a complete new level. We were like always in one of the top 200 Apple Podcast charts in one of the countries. So this cannot happen without really support and people who come again and again to listen to all the insights of all my esteemed guests that I had this year and even years before. So thank you very much. And as I say always, stay tuned. We will be again in a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.